Hello everybody and welcome back to another Dad Reacts video. This time we are reacting to the movie Fatherhood. Now, I have just finished watching this movie on Netflix, and right from the very start, let me tell you that I am not, I repeat, I am not a Kevin Hart fan. In fact, I actually put this movie on 3 days ago and turned it off after the first scene when I noticed it was Kevin Hart laying on the bed. But Saturday movie night and my wife suggests, hey, let's watch this new movie, Fatherhood. Fatherhood is based on the heartbreaking true story of Matthew Lachlan and is based on a memoir of love, Two Kisses for Maddie. Now, the film starts with the death of Matthew's wife. Matthew, played by my favourite actor, Kevin Hart. Matthew has just lost his wife. We soon come to learn that the death of his wife happened shortly after the birth of their daughter suffering a pulmonary embolism. Now, dealing with this tragedy alone would be difficult, but add into the mix a newborn baby and you have all the markings of a story going off the rails quickly. Now, fortunately for Matthew, it seems that his mother and mother-in-law, no matter how annoying they can be, are on hand to give the grieving husband and struggling new father a lifeline in those first crucial months. At this point, let me just interject a few points here. One, let me go ahead and say that this movie plays into all the negative stereotypes of men and being a father, and indeed a single father. Matthew is often told he can't do it, he shouldn't do it, and in one scene in particular, when he walks into a parenting group, he is told that this is just for women. As a father and a dad blogger, these are all the things I hear from men all over the world. Men who get in touch with me and share with me their lived experience of being a dad. For my money, most of the time, parenting done properly requires a mother and a father. And I say most of the time because, of course, I'm aware that same-sex couples do have children, but the same applies. It requires two parents equally. And secondly, doing some reading on this film shortly after I watched it, all the noise I was hearing from other bloggers and reviewers was all about the fact that Matthew is played by a black man. I mean, I'm not really sure how that is so important to the story. The film is about the message, and the message is relevant to every man in every corner of the planet, black or white. Can people not relate to this story because it's played by a black American man? Hamilton, one of the biggest and soon to be most successful musicals of all time, is a story of white American men played by blacks and Puerto Ricans. And they rap. Would that musical be better if it was all white, if it was an all-white cast? It would arguably be worse. So why does it matter? Anyway, I digress. Back to the movie review. Shortly after the funeral, Matthew's mother-in-law pitches the idea of Maddie, the new baby, be raised by them in Minnesota rather than by Matthew in Boston. Not being from the States, I had to Google the distance between Boston and Minnesota, and it's a 22-hour drive. If my mother-in-law suggested my son was to move a 22-hour drive from me, she'd get much shorter shrift than our mate Matty gives her in this movie, let me tell you that. But there is a really touching scene in this movie. The scene is with Matthew's father-in-law, in which he gives him some advice about bringing up kids. He says, let go. Look, as a parent, we do all this shit trying to make things perfect, but we don't have any control. We just have to accept that fact. What a perfect way to sum it up. And it's actually something I talk about a lot, and I've written about in my blog, and in a recent blog recently called Nobody is Perfect. Going back to work, Matthew is given some flexible time by his boss, which starts with all the negative stereotypes of a man not being able to raise a child. He says a man can't raise a child because men don't have patience, emotional vulnerability, and breasts. I can assure you, men have breasts, sir. One of the real pluses of this movie is Matthew's friend Jordan. Jordan, played by Lil Rel Howery, I think that's how I pronounce it. He is extremely witty. The timing of his quips are fantastic throughout. Really good actor. He really plays a really good part in this. We are then given a whistle-stop tour of the first year of parenting. Dirty nappies, vomit, feeding, crying. Oh, the crying. crying. It never stops. Matthew is introduced to the parent's sanity-saving device of white noise. Now, apparently, white noise replicates the sound the baby hears in the womb, so comforts the child. That's incredible, really. And so being a parent, that really, really does help. And also, putting a stroller down, as simple as that sounds, both me and my wife both couldn't figure out how to do it at first. It is not easy. This story really highlights the brotherhood and bond between men. Matthew's friends are extremely supportive of him. It reminds us that real brotherhood is unbreakable. Your real brothers will always be there to have your back. In a scene like I mentioned earlier, Matthew goes to a new parent support group. When he walks into the room, they assume he's there for an AA meeting. He's initially turned away and is told that this is a group for mothers. Matthew reminds them that no, this is a group for parents, and men are parents too. One of the things that the movie does miss, and the book does share, is that the pregnancy wasn't easy, and Liz spent several weeks in and out of hospital. In the movie, the day before and just after the birth, Liz, the actress, looks incredible. In fact, a little too good for a woman who has just given birth and is about to die. Now, for me, one of the saddest scenes in this movie is when Maddie has a sleepover at her friend's house. During bedtime, Maddie watches her friend being put to bed by her mother, and the warmth and love shown to her friend doesn't go unnoticed by Maddie. And she looks really saddened by what she sees. This reminds me a little of my childhood and watching my friends interact with their fathers. I think they capture the emotion in this scene remarkably well. Now, for me, this is one of Kevin Hart's best movies. He doesn't overact it, he's not telling a joke every 2 seconds, and you can feel the bond he has with his daughter Maddie. You also get to see the strife and mental torture he goes through when deciding to move on and introduce a new partner to your child. This can never be easy, especially when the parent has tragically passed away. I think the film does a really good job of showing the mental ups and downs Matthew goes through during this period. Some people rush to introduce partners to their children, which in my mind is extremely selfish, as invariably, mostly these relationships do not last. The only part of this film I really disliked was when he decides to leave Maddie with his mother-in-law. Watching and reading scenarios like this, I can only put myself in the shoes of a father, and there is no situation I could imagine that I would willingly allow my boy to go and live somewhere else. Matthew wasn't really struggling. Looking at his house, he was earning good money. Yes, she doesn't have family around her, but surely when you've lost your mother, having your father around is the number one priority. This is a warm, heartfelt story of a father trying his very best to bring up his daughter in a world that tells him he can't do it. He can't do it as good as women. Like I mentioned before, since starting Nobody Cares About Dad, this is the narrative I hear all over the world from guys. Guys, we have to continue to be good role models to our children. Be emotional, be vulnerable, but most importantly, be involved. And together, we can normalise this story, not demonise it. I would definitely recommend having a Netflix and chill evening and actually watching the film. I'd give this 4 out of 5 stars, so honestly, go and watch it. Like I mentioned, for me, it was one of Kevin Hart's best films, and did I mention that Kevin Hart was not my favourite actor? I've been Marco, good catching up with you again.